The apple doesn't fall far from the tree. Yes, it is. Okay, good evening. I hope you are all doing well. Today we're learning Maseches, Zevachim Daf Samach Gimel. A lot of Beis Hamikdash Gemaras, obviously, as we've been learning, less complex than the first half of the first quarter of the Masechta, first third. We're right now about two-thirds of the way down on Samach Beis and Mid Beis. I have in my Gemara the first word on the line is Hahumi Boile, and we're starting with the words Sha'al Rib Shimon ben Yossi ben Lakunya es Rib Yossi. So a question was posed from Rib Shimon ben Yossi, who was the son of Lakunya, to Rib Yossi. Omer Haya Rib Shimon ben Yochai Avir Yesh ben Kevesh Lemizbeach. When in fact they built the ramp, was the ramp joined to the Mizbeach, or was there a space? So says the Gemara in the name of Reb Shimon ben Yossi ben Lakunya. He thought that he had heard in the name of Reb Shimon ben Yochai that there was in fact a little bit of air. There was a space. The Mizbeach and the Kevesh did not meet all the way. I'm just going to use this measure. There was an inch gap. It's an inch gap. I don't know if you need to have hops for that. It wasn't like a big jump, but we'll soon see that there's a din of karka, that you need to be able to have ground between the ramp and the mizbech. Okay, so we'll get into the discussion here. But the question that he asked was, does Reb Shimon ben Yochai hold this way? Amar lo Reb Yossi says back to him, V'ata iyata omer kain. Pashut that that's the case, that the kevesh and the mizbech were not physically connected. The proximity, they were proximal, but they weren't actually in contact. Says the Gemara, I can show you. V'alo kvar ne'emar, we have a pasuk. V'asisa olosecha habasar v'hadam. We have a hekesh between basar and dam. Madam bizrika, af basar bizrika. We see, says the Gemara, that how do you do dam? It has to be thrown. So too when it comes to basar, the basar also has to be thrown. So if you're going to put an animal on top of the mizbeach, it needs to be thrown, seemingly implying that there's going to be a gap between the kevesh and the mizbeach. Omar lo, he says to him, Shani Omer, Omed Betzad Ma'aroch V'Zorik. Yeah, I agree to the hekesh that there needs to be a zrika of basar, but I'm just going to stand next to the fire and do that. That doesn't teach me that there's a hefsek between the mizbeach and the kevesh. Amar Leikshu Zorek, when a guy is throwing something onto the fire, is he throwing it Lama'aroch Adluka Hu Zorek? Is he throwing an animal onto a lit fire? O lema'arocha she'ena deluka hu zorek. Have omer lema'arocha deluka hu zorek. Hasa mishum delo efshar. That's not a good argument. You can't say that you're doing zrika on by the meat because of halachic purposes. You're doing it because you can't stick your hand over the beginning of the fire to put the animal down. Obviously, you're throwing it. That doesn't explain the pasuk. Ella, why do we have the pasuk? It must be that there's a halachic need for literally throwing it, which means that the kevesh and the mizbech were not fully connected. Rav Papa Amar Kidam, there was something similar about the dam, and here's where we get to some of the lumdus of why it is that the kevesh and the mizbech were not connected. 8 lines from the bottom. Ma dam avir karka mafsiko. Just like when it comes to zrikas hadam, the Kohen is standing, I'm making this up, 2 feet from the mizbech, and he's doing zrika. So when he does the zrika, when the blood's in the air, it has karka underneath it. The floor of the azar is underneath it. The Gemara says, Af basar avir karko mafsiko. When you're taking an animal from the ramp, you're throwing it on from the ramp, seemingly, and that's what it seems like from here. It must therefore be that when it goes in the air, that there's karka between the actual mizbeach and the ramp. So let's just use my stender as an example, which kind of looks like a ramp. And let's assume I'll just give you the sideways version. And let's say this that this box of tissues is the mizbeach. Says the Gemara, no, it has to be that there's a gap, so that when he throws from here, when it's right here over the gap, there's karka underneath. That's what Rav Papa says is the requirement and why the kevesh was not sealed. There's no caulk. Those first things that come to mind, right? You're going to join these two things. How are they going to do? Are they screwing it in? Are there L brackets? No, none of that. That is not what happened at all.
Not that big, that long, it was ended at the airspace.
Unbelievable.
right?
Just think about how much weight it was.
32 hours.
32 by 16 width by 10. It's a massive three-dimensional triangle. What's the area for a triangle?
It's like, yeah, the base.
One half the base, where the base was about 31 and the height was 10. So that's 300. So that's a square amos. It's huge. A square amma is a cube of 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet by 1.5 feet. And there were 150 of them. I mean, they were just so big. So you're right. And they didn't have metal like we have metal to reinforce. I don't know how they did it, but your point is excellent. Yeah, it was obviously a feat of some kind. Okay, that was din number one for the day. 7 lines from the bottom. Amr of Yehuda, Shnei kvashim ktanim yotzim min hakevesh sheben ponen liyasod ulasove. If you wanted to get onto the yasod, you didn't just step up onto the yasod. Look at the picture on the bottom. The picture on the bottom indicates that from the bottom of the ramp, if you go off to the left, the ramp will take you to the yasod. If you go off to the right, the yasod is only an amma off the ground. It's just interesting. Think about that. It's going 16 amos, a little bit more because it's on an angle. No, sorry. It's going 32 amos, but on an angle. So let's call it 34, 33 amos, whatever it is. But it's only going up 1 amma. So the incline is almost zero. It's like a negligible incline. It's 45 feet of ramp to go up 1.5 feet. So you probably wouldn't even notice from the. 2%. It's nothing. It's like such a tiny percent of an incline. However, the one on the right was going up to the Sovev, which was 1 plus 5, I think. 1 plus 4, I think it was 1 plus 5. I think it was 6 amos off the ground. 6 amos is 9 feet. So 32 amos, which is 45 feet, with an incline yielding at the end of the ramp 9 feet, 10 feet, let's call it a chves. So that's a 1 to 3 ratio, right? So what is that? That's very small. It's obviously a greater degree. That you'll feel you'll feel that on a treadmill. That's already the real deal. You'll feel 3%. Yeah, they were. You'd go up the same ramp, and if you wanted the yesod, you'd go to the small left ramp. You go to the sovev. You're going up here, and then
those adjuncts off, do they connect at the point where the Soviet and the Yisod, they physically.
Did they fully adjoin?
Yeah, do they need to also have
So I don't think so. I'll tell you why. Because you weren't doing an avoda there. There you were just accessing those places, right? The Soviet you had to walk around to do. I think that's the case. I could be right. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe they're. I don't know. I didn't look into that. I was just reacting to your question. Could be. Let's see if Rashi says it. Yeah. Doesn't say in Rashi, but Rashi does say that you're bringing the shirayim of the chatas. It could be that there's an avoda there. Let's assume that it wasn't connected. Okay, so then says the Gemara me and my lack of knowledge. The next line says umuvdalan min hamizbech melonima, and they were separated from the mizbech. So these two smaller ramps were separated by a hair's breadth, which is obviously not what it means because that's a construction that's nearly impossible. To have a margin of error of a couple of microns is not the way we do construction, certainly not the way they did it. How do we know? Shne'emar saviv v'rbibo amar ravua. V'yitzrich, we actually need both psukim. V'yitzrich l'michtav saviv, v'yitzrich l'michtav ravua. Because of Rachmana saviv, if I only had the word saviv without ravua, havimina da'agul magal, that I could make a circular shape around the mizbech. Incorrect. Therefore, because of Rachmana ravua, that when you're making these ramps, they can't be curved. They have to be straight, rectangular, straight, whatever, proper angles, not circles. Because of Rachman Ravua, if it only said Ravua, I might have thought that I could even do a shape around the Mizbeach that would be a little bit not square. Arich v'katin is how they said rectangle back in the day, long and short. One axis was not axis in this way, but the length was one and the width was another. So because of Rachmana Saviv, that's not the case. You're not allowed to learn it that way. Says the Gemara something. How long was the ramp? 32. How big was the Mizbeach in the second Beis HaMikdash? 32. So says the Gemara, what's 32 plus 32? So the Mishnah says that the Mizbeach plus the Kevesh was 62. That's not correct. 32 plus 32 is 64. Hani Shisin va'arba havu. So says the Gemara, you're right that is the measurement, but you made a miscalculation as to where the Mizbeach, where the Kevesh ended. Nimtza poreach ama al yesod ve'ama al hasovev. So, if I'm approaching the south of the Mizbeach from where I am, the first thing I will bump into is the yesod, which is an ama. The ramp was inset above that. And then if you climb the wall a little bit, there's a sovev. And the ramp was also higher than that. So really, when you're connecting the ramp right up to where the horns are, that is 2 amos into the 32. So therefore, 32 ramp. If you look at it, look where it's connecting to the line that is common to the keren, to the corners, to the horns.
Yeah. Saying the first metal really should continue beyond and cover the sovev, no?
Mine does cover the sovev.
Wow.
Come visit. Because the last time I held up a small picture, you made fun of me for a couple of days. The ramp goes up to the line where the keren matches.
Oh,
and it crosses 1 amma, 2 ammas. So that means
that's not what we have.
Yeah. So it's 30 on the Mizbeach side. The ramp only covers 30 of the 32. He has it wrong at the sovev. Oh, that's a bad picture.
That was a little stops at the sovev.
That's a bad picture. But I'm glad you didn't trust me and I made you get out of your chair. So that's what the Gemara says. Really, it is Taka 62. If you're measuring from the beginning of the ramp to the north side of the Mizbeach, it's 32 ramp and a remaining 30 of the Mizbeach. Turning to the top of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph, Amar Rami Bar Chama, Kol Kivshei Kvashim, Shalosh Amos le'ama. In general, when ramps are built, there's 3 ammas of forward distance for 1 amma of elevation. Chutz mikivsha shamizbeach shahaya shalosh amos umechza ve'etzba ve'shlish etzba bezachrusa. Very, very, very exacting. This is like theta. It's like the angle of, in Pythagorean's theorem, you're like, well, Pythagorean's theorem is not really about angles, but you could determine angles from the sine of, or SOHCAHTOA, as we learned in school. I learned it from my dad, probably. I probably didn't learn it at school, if I'm being honest. But there we could figure out the angle. But he tells us exactly what the elevation point is. For every amma of height, how much ramp was there? He says, Shalosh amos, umechza, 3.5 amos, ve'etzba, 3.5 plus an etzba, ushlish etzba, bizachrusa. And a third of the measure of a finger, assuming bizachrusa, assuming we're using a thumb. So again, 3 amos, 3.5 amos, plus a thumb and a third of a thumb. That is how much ramp you get for 1 amma of elevation. That brings us, Baruch Hashem, to a new Mishnah on the top of Samach Gimel Amud Aleph. This is not a long Gemara, as you can see. There's a new Mishnah on the bottom already. This mincha is about a korban. This Mishnah, it's a little foretelling, is about a korban mincha. Minachos hayu nikmatzos b'chol makom ba'azara. The kmitza could be done anywhere in the azara. V'ne'achalos lifnim min aklayim, and they can be eaten anywhere within the azara space. L'zichrei kahuna, for anyone who is a male kohen. B'chol ma'achal, it could be cooked in any way. L'yom v'layla ad chatzos. It can be eaten the day that you do the kmitza and the whole night up to chatzos. We've learned in other mishnayos that there's a machlokes is if chatzos is the upper limit or if it's just a geder. We typically assume it's a geder, as far as I know. That brings us to the end of the Mishnah. Amar Rebbe Lazar, mincha shenikmitza beheichal kshera. Now, we said that you can do kmitza in the azara. That's that general area around the mizbeach. But let's say you made a mistake, a big mistake, and you went into the heichal, like where the mizbeach and the menorah is. That's not a good place to go by accident. But if you did, and you did the kmitza, The halacha is that it's kshera, shkein matzina b'siluk b'zichin. The same thing is true with the bazichin, with the frankincense, that you would, in fact, it would be kosher if you did that action inside the inside the heichal. Says the Gemara, Masiv Rabbi Yirmiyah, hold on one second. V'kamatz misham, v'lo kumtzo, says the Gemara based on a pasuk in Vayikra Perek Beis, that the pasuk says v'kamatz misham, that he would do the kmitza from there. Where would the Kohen do the kmitza? Mimakom sheragle hazar omdos. The only place that a Kohen could do the kmitza is in a place where the zar could give him the flour. A zar is not allowed anywhere near the heichal. You wanted to say at the open of our Gemara, Rebbe Lazar, that if you did a mincha and you were nikmitza in the heichal, you did the kmitza in the heichal, it's kosher. Just physically impossible. It has to be in a place where the Yisrael can hand him the korban mincha. It's not shaykh to say that the heichal is acceptable. It says the Gemara, that's one shita. And the Brisa continues, Ben B'Seir Omer, Minayin she'im kamatz b'smol she'yachzir v'yikmotz b'yamin. If the Kohen, some people do things with their left hand. This Kohen is really a righty, but his right hand was hurting him. He had some, tendonitis. It's a carpal tunnel. So he switched to his left hand and did the kmitza. No good. No good. You're not allowed to do that. You're not allowed to do lefty work inside the Beis HaMikdash. So how do you know that if the Kohen used his left hand, that sheyachzer v'yikmot b'yamin, that he should go back and he should do it with his right hand? Talmud Omar, misham. Mimakom shekamatz kvar. Go back to right where you grabbed the flour from. Dump it back in and do it again with your right hand. Someone's watching. No, left hand. Start over. Got to do it again. So the question that we have on our Gemara on Rebbe Lazar is from the shita of the first shita of our Gemara, which is that mimakom shiragle hazar omdos. According to Rebbe Lazar, the mincha can be done even in the heichal. According to the beginning of the brisa that Rabbi Yirmiyah quotes, that's impossible because we need the zar, a non-Kohen, to be in that place where the Kohen is when he gives it. That's impossible. It says the Gemara, Ika de Amre hu mosiv la v'hu mefarik la. Some say that he asked this question and answered it, Rebbe Lazar. And Ika de Amre, Amar le, this should not be Rabbi Akiva, it should be Rabbi Yaakov le Rabbi Yirmiyah. That really Rabbi Yaakov says, and he calls him by his last name, Bar Tachlifa. I'm going to explain everything to you. Don't be so confused. So what does he say? Because remember, Rabbi Yirmiyah asked on Rabbi Lazar. Rabbi Lazar said, you're allowed to do the kmitza and the heichal. And Rabbi Yirmiyah says, what are you talking about? We have a Mishnah. So here's the answer. Says the Gemara, a quarter of the way down, almost a third of the way down. Lo nitzrucha ela lahachshir kol ha'azora kula. The pasuk that you use of a kamatz misham teaches me that the whole azor is mutter. And sal kadaita chamina, I might have thought as follows. Hol the ole koche kochim umencha koche kochim. Since an ola is koche kochim and so is a mincha, therefore make a hekesh. Ma ola tu'una tzafon af mincha tu'una tzafon. I might have thought that they're both there. That would have been my havamina. That maybe we limit where a kmitza can be done only to the tzafon because of the pasuk that has a hekesh. Says the Gemara. Therefore, we might need a pasuk to teach that the korban minchas kmitza does not only have to be in the tzafon; it could be anywhere in the azara. Says the Gemara, how could you make a comparison between an ola, which is the sacrifice of an animal that's kalil, and a korban mincha, where it's not an animal and it's not kalil, because the shiur mincha can be eaten by others. Says the Gemara, ma'ala ola sheken kalil, apples and oranges. You can't make a hekesh between those. It says the Gemara, don't worry, mechatas. You're right. But we can learn from a chatas that isn't kalil. Says the Gemara, malachatas sheken mechaperes al chai vekares. We've seen this so many times. Says the Gemara, you can't compare a korban mincha to a chatas. A chatas is powerful. It's mechaper on a chiyuv kares. Says the Gemara, fine. Let's talk about me'asham, which is not mechaper on kares. Says the Gemara, mala asham shkein mine damim. There's blood. What zrikas adam do you have with a korban mincha? It's made of flour. Again, apples and oranges. Oh, maybe mikulhu. Maybe we should learn from all three of them because they each have a feature that we like. O lechatas and asham, says the Gemara. Malakul shekain mine damim. How are we ever going to learn anything from the world of a korban mamish to a korban mincha? It's impossible. It's impossible. Ella, says the Gemara, Itzrich. Here's what we need to understand. Sal kadaita chamina. Holuch sevi higisha lamizbeach. And the pasuk also says, "V'hei rimenu bekumtzo." Because one pasuk says that we bring the mincha to the mizbeach, and another one says that we bring a kmitza. Mahagasha, when we present the korban, where do we present it? Bekeren ma'aravis dromis, the southern western corner. So if this is my mizbeach, and this is the heichal over here, it's the bottom left corner, the southwest south and west of the mizbeach, right here. This is where we bring the chatas. So it says the Gemara, if the hagasha is going to be there, af kmitza bekaren ma'arav is dromis. Very reasonable comparison, because we're comparing the hagasha of a mincha to the kmitza of a mincha. If the hagasha is southwest, maybe I would have thought that the kmitza is also only southwest. Kamash malon, the pasuk that we saw earlier, no. The whole azara, including even the heichal, is kosher for kmitza. That's what the kamash malon means. So we conclude this part of the Gemara saying that the hagasha needs to be by the southwest, and we're going to speak about that more. And while that's true, the kmitza can be done anywhere in the azara, and that is why we have a pasuk to teach that to us. And we're halfway down, a little bit more than halfway down, and says the Gemara as follows: Amar Rabbi Yochanan, shlamim, a korban shlamim, sheshachtan beheichal ksherim. Again, don't try this at home. They were in the wrong room. If you take a korban shlamim and you shecht it in the heichal, the halacha is that it's kosher. That's not normal. Shlamim don't belong in the heichal. That's like koche kochim. That's fiber sel shemar kippurim. It's a very holy room. You don't bring a regular shlamim there. So says the Gemara, how do we know that this is true? And the Gemara responds, pesach ohel moed, that you should shecht it at the opening of an ohel moed. And here, the Gemara makes a jump. I struggled with this because I don't understand the drasha so well. Here's what the Gemara says. How do we know that a shlamim can be shechted in the heichal? Because the pasuk says it should be shechted at the door to the ohel moed. The lo yehei tafel chamor min ha'ikr. The door, which is secondary, shouldn't have a stringency that the inside doesn't have. So if I'm allowed to shecht my shlamim at the opening of the Pesach on Moed, obviously I should be able to shecht it inside. I struggled with this. The inside has more kedusha than the outside. But that's not what the Gemara says, and I'm wrong. The Gemara says that the Torah would never say you could do it at the Pesach of the Ol Moed unless it was also mutter to do it inside the Ol Moed. The Haraya says the Gemara that a korban shlamim that was shechted inside the Heichal is kosher. Wait. Hold on 1 second, says the Gemara. Meisvei, 2/3 of the way down. We have a brisa from Maseches Menachos. We'll get there another 60, 70 days. And this is not Rabbi Yochanan ben Beseira. That's Pasha, not his name. That says the Gemara, Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira Omer. Let's say that we were being attacked in the Beis HaMikdash, Rachmana Litzlan. That if the Kohanim are being attacked, they're allowed to go into the Heichal, a roofed part of the building, and they can sit there and even eat Kodshe Kodshim. How do we know that that's true? Talmud Lomar, the Kodesh HaKodashim Tochlanu, you're allowed to eat it there. Says the Gemara, I don't need a pasuk for that. And I'll show you why. Ve'amai. Why do you need to burn a pasuk in Chumash to teach me a halacha that I already learned? Nema, b'chatzer ohel moed yochlu. Just like we learned that the shlamim can be done in the heichal because it could be done Pesach ol moed, lo yehei tafel chamer min ha'ikr. And if you're allowed to eat kodesh kodshim in certain parts of the Beis HaMikdash, obviously you're allowed to eat it in the heichal. If that's true, like we wanted to suggest a couple of lines ago, I don't need your new pasuk about the case of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira when people were attacking the Beis HaMikdash. The Kohanim can go in. Pasha, they can go inside. We already learned that. Then shloye tafel chamer mina ikr. If the shlamim can be eaten inside the Beis HaMikdash, inside the heichal, because it can be eaten by the ohel, pasha that the kodshe kodshim could be eaten inside the heichal because it could be outside the kodshe kodshim. It should be pasha. It should be outside the heichal. Says the Gemara, you've made a grave error. Hachi hashta. This is so beautiful. Says the Gemara, your question is totally off base. Hasam avoda de adam ovid b'makam rabo. Where you're doing the avoda, you're bringing a korban shlamim because the Chumash says you have to bring a korban shlamim. There we say amrinon lo ye tafel chamer mina ikar. When it comes to the avoda of the Beis HaMikdash, yes, if the Torah says Pesach ol moed, then kal v'chomer you can do it inside. because it can't be that the tafel is allowed to have a korban, but the chomer is not allowed. It can't be. It can't be that you can do a shlamim outside the omer, but you can't do it inside. When you're talking about avoda, we apply this principle. But by the achila of the kohanim, of the kodshe kodshim, when people are attacking, that's not an avoda. You don't have to eat it. By achila, de'ein adam ochel b'makam rabo, who eats in front of their master. That's not normal behavior. You don't eat in front of the holiest people in the world. Lo yehei tafel chamer mina ikr lo amrina. That principle that would have potentially taught us that just because it's mutter outside, therefore it's mutter inside, that doesn't apply when it comes to achila. Achila is not avodas Hashem. That achila is not avodas Hashem. Yeah, you can eat it, but it's not a shlamim. You're just hungry. So the Gemara says we do apply the principle of lo yehei tafel chamer mina ikr when it's avoda, but we don't apply it when it comes to stam achila, stam behavior in the Beis HaMikdash. Beautiful. New Mishnah at the bottom of Samech Gimel and Aleph, 10 lines from the bottom. Chatas ha'of ha'isa nases al keren deromis ma'ravis. The chatas of a bird was done on the horn of the southwest. The same corner that we spoke about a minute ago, where the hagosha of the korban mincha was. So too, says the Gemara, that's where the chatas ha'of was processed. So again, if this is the mizbeach, and this over here is the heichal, then this corner, the southwest corner, is where they would do the chatas ha'of. Really, it could be done anywhere. That's a bit of a weird syntax. No, the Mishnah is do it over here. It's really kosher everywhere, but do it over here. Okay, so we're not going to learn about this today, but that's not a normal way to talk. The Mishnah is not verbose. Just say where it applies. We'll get to this. Says the Gemara, Ushlosha dvarim hayisa oso keren mishameshas milamata ushlosha milamala. That corner of the dromis ma'arabis, that was a busy corner. The southwest corner of the mizbeach was very special. What was special about it? Well, what's most special about it is that it was right opposite the heichal, according to this Gemara, as we'll soon see. We have seen different shitas of the placement of the mizbeach. There are three options. It is either fully in the north, but with the southern side of the mizbeach aligning with the midline of the doors of the ulam and the heichal, or it's 50-yard line where the middle of the mizbeach is aligned with the doors to the heichal, or it's all the way in the south. Today's Gemara is going to be that it's all the way in the north. I'm saying it now. We'll see how the math works out in a few minutes. So what does the Mishnah say? That there were three things that happened at this corner, three below the chut hasikra, that midline of the mizbeach, and three above. Milimata, below the chut hasikra on the southwest keren. What was done over there? Chatas ha'of v'hagashos u'shiur hadam. There we did the mitzas chatas ha'of. We did the avoda there. We did the hagasha of a korban mincha by the southwest keren, and also shiur hadam was also done by the southwest on the yesod. It was all done milamata. Again, all that was below the chut hasikra, the oaf, the hagasha of the mincha, and the shadam. Milamalan, above the chut hasikra on that southwest corner, nisuch hayayin, that's where libations were done during korbanos. The hamayim, nisuch hamayim, which was done daily throughout Sukkot, was done on the southwest corner. And the olas ha'of, as opposed to a chatas ha'of, kshehi rabba b'mizrach. When things were super busy on the east side, they bring it over to the west side. We're going to learn about all this later. Good. And then we're going to circle back to a principle that we saw outside of a Mishnah, but one that is, of course, very, very important, and that is as follows. Last line of Samech Gimel Amud Aleph says the Gemara, Kol ha'olen lemizbeach olen derech yamin. When a person goes up the ramp, they get to the top of the ramp, they always turn to the right. So again, if my Gemara is the mizbeach, and I'll just use a sitter over here as a ramp. So if you're coming up the ramp, right, you come up the ramp, and then you're turning right. This side over here is the south side. The ramp comes from the south. You come up, you're on the south side. What happens when you turn right? You're facing east. So that's what the Gemara says over here, the Mishnah, I should say, that you go up the ramp and you're turning right. Umakifin v'yordin derech smol. And what happens is once you're up on the mizbeach or the sovev, wherever you are, you go to the right, which is east. You go to the left, which is north. You turn left again, which takes you to the west. Left again takes you to the south. Left again to the mizbeach. and then you come down the Mizbeach to the south. And the Mishnah does something strange here, and it says that when you go down the ramp, you're Yarden Derech Smol, that you're going down the left side of the ramp. That's actually not true, because when you come to this part of the Mizbeach and you turn, you're on the right side of the ramp. Huh? Correct. So really the pshat over here, this is what Rashi says over here. Really what's going on over here is that you're going down the ramp that is the left side of the ramp from the perspective of standing at the bottom of the ramp. Yeah. We look at the ramp from the south. So this side of the ramp is the left side of the ramp. You're coming down, it's still the left side of the ramp. To your right, nobody cares about your feelings. It's the left side of the ramp. The perspective that we're looking at is from the foot of and from the base of the Mizbeach, of the Kebesh. Except for the three avodas that were done on the Keren, Dromis Ma'aravis, that southwest corner. Why? There, you didn't go east, north, west, back down, walk all the way around counterclockwise. You didn't have to do that. You'd get to the top of the ramp, you'd go do your work, spin on your heels, and come back down. You were done. You didn't have to walk a circuitous route. If you were doing work on the southwest corner, you'd go up the ramp straight to where you need to go, make a little bit of a left, and then you're done. It breaks the din of the Mishnah. No? The Mishnah said, Kol ha'olam lemizbech olam derech yamin. This is the exception to that rule. Says the Gemara, and we're going to be stopping at the two dots about 10 lines from the bottom. As you can see, the Amud Aleph on the next daf is beautifully short, but the Amud Beis is not beautifully short. So the Amud Beis on Samach Dalet is significant, so we have a lot of work to do tomorrow. But let us first finish up today. Minohani mili. How do we know this to be true? Thank you to Rashi for clarifying what part of the Mishnah you're talking about. We learned 10 halachos. Rashi says, Minohani mili, how do we know that the Chat HaSaof was taken care of? We said it in the Mishnah below the Chut HaSikra on the southwest corner. How do we know? Amar Rabbi Shomer Kra. Lo yasim aleha shemen v'lo yiten aleha levona ki chatasi. This is talking about a minchas chote. And says the Gemara, chatas kruya mincha, mincha kruya chatas. Says the Gemara that I can see that the word of chatas and mincha are interchangeable. And therefore, machatas te'una tzafon, af mincha te'una tzafon. We don't really have time to read this Rashi, but Rashi says this is completely the wrong girsa in our Gemara. I'll just point you to the end of a lengthier Rashi. The Rashi starts a quarter of the way down. Dibura maschil machatas tu'una. We're only going to read the beginning and end. Look at Rashi. This is a rare Rashi. Yodea ani shegirsa zu shibush. Sharei lo chatas ha'of v'lo mincha tu'unin safon. It's completely wrong. Skip to the bottom of Rashi, 4 lines before the end of that Rashi. V'nir be'enai, that what should the Gemara have said? Ma chatas psula shelo lishma, af mincha psula shelo lishma. Totally different than our Gemara. So let's go back inside. Not machatas to unatzafon, but rather Rashi's insertion of machatas psula shelo lishma, af mincha psula shelo lishma, and look at the next line. Ma mincha bekeren ma'arabis dromis, af chatas bekeren ma'arabis dromis. In other words, we have a hekesh from mincha over to chatas, and here we're talking about a chatas ola, not the first version of our Gemara that we haven't, but rather the way Rashi does, because the first hekesh argues with the second hekesh. The first hekesh says it has to be in the north. And the second one says it has to be on the southwest. Okay, very good. So now we know that chatas is learned from mincha. Asks the Gemara, mincha gufa minala. How do we know that a mincha has to be on the southwest? Says the Gemara, Tanya, lifnei Hashem. We know that it has to be southwest because it has to be lifnei Hashem. Yochel b'marav. You might have thought that this language of lifnei Hashem means that it has to be in the west. Talmud Lomar, no. El Pnei HaMizbeach, which implies the south. Remember how we just said that we always look at the Mizbeach from the perspective of the foot of the ramp? So what is Pnei HaMizbeach? The south. So the Gemara says, Lifnei Hashem, you might have thought was Ma'ariv. No. El Pnei HaMizbeach. El Pnei HaMizbeach Yochel B'darom. I might have thought, like you just said, that it's the south. No. Talmud Lomar Lifnei Hashem, which seems to imply in front of the doors of the Heichal, which is west. So, which one is it? HaKetzad. So says the Gemara, answer number 1. Magisha b'karen ma'aravis dromis Keneged chuda shel keren v'dayo. You bring it to the corner that's southwest and put it on the actual corner, the southwest keren, the corner itself. You're standing on the sovev. That's where you put it. Good, v'dayo, and that's sufficient. And that way, in other words, it's like the mezuzah putting it on an angle. You're fulfilling this shita on that one. You're doing two things at once. A little bit on the corner, you're good. Rabbi Lazar Amar, no. Yachal yagi shen lema'arava shel keren, o ledroma shel keren. You might have thought that you should put it to the west, on the side facing the heichal, or on the south, which is facing the Pnei Mizbeach where the ramp was. Amris, what would you have said? We have to learn in a very careful way. Kol makom shatamote shnei mikros. If you have two psukim like we do, we have Lifnei Hashem and we have El Pnei Mizbeach. Echad mekayim atzmo mekayim chavero. If you have one pasuk that helps both, the echad mekayim atzmo mevatel chavero, and the other one only helps itself and not the other, then we ignore that drasha. Manichen zeh shemekayim atzmo. We want to keep the pasuk. We want to manichen zeh shemekayim atzmo mevatel chavero. The pasuk that only works for itself but not for its friend. We don't learn that one. B'tov senes shemekayim atzmo mekayim chavero. And instead, we learn the one pasuk that teaches us exactly what we need and doesn't ruin the other one. So therefore, Kshata Omer El Pnei Hashem b'marav heichan kayemes El Pnei HaMizbeach. Ukshata Omer El Pnei HaMizbeach b'darom kayemes Lifnei Hashem. That word should be changed to b'marav heichan kayemes. So says the Gemara, Omer Avashi, Kasavar Haitana Kule Mizbeach b'tzafon kai. Let's just get this super clear. This is the Gemara's conclusion is very simple. The drasha is a little difficult, but the Gemara's conclusion is simple. Let's assume here, because that's what the Gemara assumes, that this is the Mizbeach, and it's all the way north, to the point that where my hand is on the southern Mizbeach, it's a perfect line to the doors of the Heichal. So if I'm right here, El Pnei Mizbeach, aren't I also directly, that's Lifnei Hashem. So Lifnei Hashem Pnei Mizbeach is one drasha. And that's why we're able to have that exact spot to be correct. And that is how we know that a mincha needs to be on the southwest. And that's also how we know, at least according to this approach, that the Mizbeach must have been north of that center line of the Mizbeach of where the doors open, because otherwise there's no way to understand the Gemara. It must therefore be the Mizbeach was in the Tzafon, the Mincha was learned from there, and from the Mincha we have a Hekesh to Chatas, and that's how we know that a Chatas has to be done in the southwest. We'll stop right here at the two dots, wishing you all a beautiful night.